over. It's Monday. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Are problems still brewing? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? We'll talk about that. Plus, there's a flop artist in the NBA. And according to some folks, the number one nemesis is LeBron James. Also, an injury to Anthony Davis. Could this ruin the Lakers' title hopes? All that and more coming up. First Takes in the house. I told y'all the weekend's over, so you know what time it is. Let's go.
Here is Anthony Davis on the right wing. Davis fouled by Jokic.
Reaching down.
AD's holding his right Achilles. It's if he's re-injured it, yeah, and he pulled up on it hard. I think he could be done for the night.
There's always next man up. No matter who's out. We're not asking anybody to pick up what AD does. You can't do that. It's impossible. He's a special player and a special talent for a reason. So, everyone individually has to, pick up their play for the collective of the team, in AD's absence. So we look forward to that challenge.
Yep, the weekend is over and we have a lot to talk about. Everyone, welcome on into First Take on this Monday. I'm Charlie Arnold. We got Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith in the house. Both of you looking very dapper this morning. Although, Stephen A., I must say, a little disappointed to not see you with your man bag. I know that's your style staple these days, but we'll move on from that because, guys, we have injuries on two championship contenders that happened over the weekend. First, KD. He's in Brooklyn. He has a strained hamstring, but you just heard from LeBron, so let's go to LA and focus on the injury with AD. Now, last night, Anthony Davis was pulled from action after the first half after the Nuggets and aggravating the tendinosis in his right Achilles. He will now undergo an MRI today. That according to a source telling our agent Wojnarowski. The big man missing 2 games earlier this week for the same issue with his right Achilles. And the Lakers, they did go on to fall 122 to 105 to the Nuggets. So, Stephen A., let's start with you here. What was your first reaction after hearing about AD's injury?
My first reaction after hearing about Anthony Davis aggravating his right Achilles is that the Brooklyn Nets are going to win the NBA championship. That's the first reaction that I had, Max Kellerman. My reaction is that it's the Lakers, as far as I'm concerned, are the only team standing in the way of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden winning the chip. And I've dismissed the Eastern Conference, and I don't mean any disrespect. Philadelphia has vastly improved. Milwaukee is not a team to ignore. I get all of that. But the bottom line is I'm looking at James Harden right now. The brother's averaging 23, 11, and 8 on 48% shooting, 38% from three-point range. I don't need to get into Kevin Durant's number. It's at 29%. I'm worried about his hamstring strain or whatever. Keep an eye on that. But I'm as long as he's healthy, I'm looking at it along those lines. And Kyrie Irving is just playing like the superstar talent that he is. He is putting on a show night in and night out. Now, when he takes a hiatus or whatever, you get worried because that could be distraction. We understand that. But when this brother is on the court, he is something spectacular to behold. They're the number one offense in the NBA. They're absolutely, positively unstoppable. And it's going to take an elite team on both ends of the floor to knock them off. We've got elite defensive teams in the NBA. We've got elite offensive teams in the NBA. What we don't have outside of the Lakers in our mind, due to LeBron James, what we don't have is a team that has both, other than the Lakers. That's how we view them. And so when I look at Anthony Davis, LeBron is as sensational as he's been, particularly from three-point range. That was before February. In the month of February, he's shooting like 28% from three-point range. So it's dipped a little bit. Obviously, he's not doing what he's been doing for the first month and a half of the season from three-point range. But I still look at it and I say LeBron will be just fine. He'll be there when it counts, but he needs AD. And without AD, the Lakers have no chance of winning the championship. And if the Lakers have no chance, then who the hell is going to beat Brooklyn? That answer is absolutely, positively no one. And so when I heard about Anthony Davis, and I saw that Achilles strain, and I don't think, Max, he should be playing for the next month. I think he should be out at least a month. Don't even play with it. Let him sit down. No all-star, no nothing. He doesn't need to be playing for at least another month. And these guys need to get away from wearing them damn low-top sneakers. Wear some high-top sneakers, for crying out loud. That might help you a little bit, too. Go old school. Stop doing this stuff.
With Chuck Taylor? What do you want?
Max, put up the boots. Wear boots, for crying out loud. Do something. But in the end, the first thought that came to my mind is the Brooklyn Nets are going to win the NBA championship if Anthony Davis can't go.
That's not where my mind went. My mind went right to the Western Conference. First of all, let me just address your Nets point. The fact that Kyrie approaches James Harden and says, "You're the point guard, I'm off guard," is exactly right. It's self-serving in a way because Kyrie gets to shoot more. But the reason Harden's better than Kyrie really is because he has better judgment with the ball. His judgment's better than Kyrie. He's a more mature player. But in terms of just spectacular skills, Kyrie is even better than Harden. I mean, in terms of scoring the ball, I know Harden's an amazing scorer, but this is the best allocation of their resources. Harden's taller, so you think of him more as a two-guard and Kyrie shorter. But in fact, Kyrie got that right. And so I think they're going to benefit from that kind of understanding of roles. I think what we saw from DeAndre Jordan last week was important because if he can be the defensive player in the paint, and they don't have to play 5 out, they can play 4 out with Joe Harris and the big 3. They don't need to play Jeff Green at the 5. If DeAndre Jordan can be that guy to secure those defensive boards, the Nets could get out of the East. But Stephen A., that's not necessarily the situation we have right now with the Nets. We're hoping that they can get there. Right now, they're giving up more points than is possible to get to a finals. Let me say why my mind goes to the Western Conference. If the Lakers don't have AD, and I agree with you, take a nice long rest till it is better. If the Lakers don't have AD, they not only have to contend with Denver, who got playoff experience last year and just smoked them without AD, the Denver team that came back on the Clippers that wasn't ready for the Lakers last year, they're not getting by that Denver team without AD, obviously. What about Utah right now? I'm going to get to them a little bit later in the show. The Clippers. You keep talking about Kawhi came to LA and he targeted LeBron. That's true. But last year, in fact, they didn't have quite enough. They needed a point guard to organize the offense. I felt they didn't wind up with it. They didn't get Rondo in the offseason, so I thought, no, I'm not worried about the Clippers. Paul George can't be a good enough Robin to Kawhi's Batman. But Stephen A., they did a couple of things. They brought in Serge Ibaka, which we both felt was a marginal improvement over Montrezl Harrell. They can both defend, but Ibaka can also block shots and shoot from the outside, making him a more valuable piece. But also Nick Batum. Nick Batum, once upon a time, got a max deal or a near max deal, and no one was like, or some people were, but the consensus was, yeah, he's a really good player. He earned that contract. Talk about statless all-star. This guy does everything you want him to do. Then he went to a non-competitive situation. He got his money. He wasn't competing for the playoffs. He looked like he was done with basketball, to me anyway. But on the Clippers, Stephen A., this dude is back to being Nick Batum. And when you factor that in, how do the Lakers get by the Clippers without AD? Even without Batum? Even if it was Harrell without Ibaka? How would they get by the Clippers without AD? I don't think they get out of the West. I don't know if they get to the Western Conference Finals without AD. And I think that's a bigger problem than Brooklyn. Brooklyn's first got to play some defense even to get out of the East.
Well, I get where you're coming from. I mean, what I'm saying to you, Max Kellerman, is that, again, the question is, what was the first thought that came to my mind after the injury? So I'm not saying it to imply that Brooklyn would beat the Nets. I mean, that Brooklyn would beat the Lakers in the finals. I'm saying that Brooklyn would win it all. You understand what I'm saying? Because of whether the Lakers probably wouldn't get to the finals, you know, which is basically your point. So there's no disagreement there, but I don't think there's anybody else that can beat the Nets other than the Los Angeles Lakers, a healthy Los Angeles Lakers squad. I don't think there's anybody else that would beat them, and that includes the Clippers, despite what the Brooklyn Nets defensive woes are. Did you watch the game when the Clippers played the Nets a couple of weeks ago? Did you watch how the Clippers were up, you know, with I think it was like with about 6 minutes left or something, if I remember correctly, you know, they were up, and then all of a sudden, the Brooklyn Nets, in the blink of an eye, scored like 13 of the next 15
like
points.
what Denver did to them last year.
This is what they do, man. There's too much offensive firepower. And I'm just looking at it from the standpoint that I'm just wondering, what are you going to be able to do? Sure, the Clippers could come out the West, or Denver could come out the West. Hell, if you're listening to Giannis, Utah could come out the West, especially if Anthony Davis ain't healthy. But in the end, I believe whoever that team is, the Brooklyn Nets will be waiting to take them down. Without a healthy Anthony Davis, the Brooklyn Nets will win the NBA championship.
Usually, that would be right. And if you ask me to guess, I would guess that that's right now. Because when you have big pieces like Brooklyn has, if you need to tweak the roster at the trade deadline, you can. But I'm talking about as currently constructed. I don't know that the Nets beat whoever comes out of the West. That would really depend on DeAndre Jordan consistently, like he played when he played really good defense, really for the first time this year last week. That would depend on not only those guys gelling, but those guys buying in and communicating on defense in a year where, without practice because of COVID like normal, it's much more difficult to develop that. I'm not so sure. Probably they can get it, but as of right now, if it started today, they wouldn't beat any of those Western Conference teams best out of 7.
Okay, well, dating back to last season, the Lakers are 9-4 with LeBron and without Anthony Davis in the lineup, but most of those wins, guys, were against pretty mediocre, if not flat-out awful teams. All right, well, let's stay in the West and now focus on a Heat title. I'm talking about the Utah Jazz. They're 22-5 after beating the Bucks and the Heat this weekend, and the reigning back-to-back MVP Giannis giving out some big props.
Today we played the game against the best team in the West. They've been playing amazing. They won with this game 17 out of their last 18. They're playing good. They're moving the ball. They're making threes. They're finding the rollers. They're keeping it simple. They're going to the front line. They're pretty much doing everything. They're having fun.
Keeping it simple, but doing a lot. So, Max, do you think the Lakers need to be worried about the Jazz?
Yes, I do. And Kendrick Perkins was arguing this last week. Yes, they should be worried about the Jazz. I mean, the Lakers, I think the Lakers will beat the Jazz when it comes down to it, but not if AD is compromised. We're talking about if he's not on the court. If he's not on the court, the Lakers are cooked. But if AD is there, but Stephen A., let's say he's some lower percentage of himself significantly because he's dealing with an injury, yeah, the Jazz would probably beat him right now. And here's the thing. Last year we saw the Jazz and that Denver team. I can't remember a better first-round series. I don't know. You can go back to those Knicks-Miami series back in the day, Stephen A., with Alonzo and Tim Hardaway against Patrick Ewing and them. But those were defensive struggles. Denver and Utah, Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray put on a show for the ages. That should have been in a conference finals, not in the first round. And Denver won by the skin of their teeth. And that was without Bogdanovich, right? So you add him, and now you think, oh, maybe that swings it Utah's way. That's not a stretch to say you add a really important piece and it can swing Utah's way. But here's the real difference. Mike Conley was not Mike Conley last year. Not in the regular season or the playoffs. When they moved to get him, I thought, ooh, that's great. Mike Conley is sort of a poor man's Chris Paul. And not a poverty-stricken man's Chris Paul either. Just not quite Chris Paul, but does a lot of the same things for your team. I always thought he was underrated, and if he's not great, he's the next thing to it. But he wasn't Mike Conley for that team last year. Stephen A., Mike Conley is playing elite basketball this year. All-star and then some, no doubt. And if you put him, because when we think about these things, yeah, it's nice to have Bogdanovich as a piece. Joe Ingles, Gobert as a defensive stopper, But what we're really thinking is, yeah, we know you got one guy who could go get it for you when you need it. Usually it takes two. Mike Conley can be Donovan Mitchell's crime partner that way, not just in terms of organizing the defense and hitting shots, but getting his own shot when it matters. Yes, they need to be worried about Utah.
I say no. And the reason that I say no is only because, I throw health aside because that's a given. If you're compromised to the point where you can't play or you're just a shell of yourself because you're playing but you're clearly hobbled, a lot of teams have a chance. We understand that. When I answer a question like this, I'm saying Utah 100% healthy, the Lakers 100% healthy. Do I have a reason for concern? The answer is no. And here's why I feel that way. Because I don't trust anybody on Utah outside of Donovan Mitchell. I like the way Mike Conley is playing, and I appreciate that. I've always had tremendous respect for Mike Conley. He's averaging about 16 this year, shooting 45% from the field, about 41% from three-point range, which is impressive. No question about that. That's not what he normally does. I'm assuming that will dip a little bit as the season progresses. I'm just going to make that assumption. Okay, we look at them defensively. Rudy Gobert is averaging 14 points, 13 rebounds, nearly 3 blocks a game. You can rely on him to do that against almost anyone, Max, except who?
Yeah.
That would be Anthony Davis and LeBron James, okay? So we got that going on, right? Royce O'Neal. This dude is proving to be a pretty elite defender in the NBA. I think he's the unsung hero for the Utah Jazz. He's like their version of Drew Holiday, not offensively, but defensively in terms of what he brings to the table, okay? Well, here's the problem with that. If you're going up against the Lakers, who's your point? Who's your point? Who's the dude that's running the show? Who's the dude that exploits mismatches at every turn? And Royce O'Neal is about 5 inches shorter and about 30 pounds lighter. I mean, this is what I'm talking about here. So when you break it down from a basketball perspective, I think the Lakers are nightmarish for Utah. Now, Donovan Mitchell is a stud, and as far as I'm concerned, a superstar. And I look at it a little bit differently than you. You talk about how his matchup against Jamal Murray should have been in conference finals. Yeah, that's kind of true. But here's another way to look at it. Because of last season and COVID and all that came with it and being in a bubble, what a way to start off the playoffs with those two going at it with each other. It was spectacular.
That was unbelievable.
So we got this. Utah is a top 2 defensive team. They're elite defensively on the interior, as well as getting out to defend three-pointers, because you know the interior is protected by Rudy Gobert. Offensively, they're far more efficient than we expected, and they deserve credit. But do I believe it's something that they can sustain the last 2 quarters of the season? I'm not sold. I will say this, though. If they're a top 2 or 3 seed, they don't have to worry about going up against a 4th seed or a 3rd seed until the 2nd round. So because of that, I can see them getting out of the 1st round this year, being in the conference semifinals. But I got to see I have no questions about Donovan Mitchell. 0. Everybody else, I got to see it to believe it.
If push came to shove and you called for both of our predictions.
And they're exceptionally well coached, by the way. They're exceptionally well coached.
Right, that's what I'm getting to. If push came to shove and you asked for our predictions, I'm also going to take the Lakers if they're both fully healthy. And that's because of what you identified. They have LeBron James. So in those close games, you just trust that a guy who's so much better than anyone on the other team will get it done. But when you bring up, yeah, in the end, I'll take, but should they be worried about the Jazz? Do the Jazz pose a legitimate threat? They do, because of what you just mentioned. Exceptionally well-coached teams that move the ball well, that play unselfishly, and that also have superstars when they need it most. Donovan Mitchell is a star regularly. When you need him most, he's a superstar. And the gravity he creates, and even a guy like Bogdanovich creates, makes it easier for Conley, Stephen A. So when you say you don't know if Conley is sustainable at these rates because the advanced analytics say he's elite, like a top 5 player or something like that, right? He's something crazy this year. Maybe that'll regress a little bit to the mean, but the point is he can have the best season of his career this year because of the situation he's in. And sometimes a team that's exceptionally well coached, that has a superstar and other important parts, can pop their head up and knock off the champion, knock off the favored team. We've seen it with the Dallas Mavericks. We've seen it with the Detroit Pistons. And it could be that the Jazz are a version of that this season.
We'll see.
All right, guys. Well, the Jazz, as you know, best record in the league right now, winning 18 of their last 19. We'll see if they can carry on the momentum tonight when they take on the Eastern Conference leading 76ers. All right, well, we all know that LA is synonymous with Hollywood, but guess what? The league is cracking down on the king and is flopping theatrics. Don't miss why it is fair to slap the flopper label on LeBron. And Dak does something this weekend that should make Cowboys fans
play the game for money. Never once in my life have I ever touched a football and thought about individual bank accounts or what was to come. I play the game because of my love, my passion. Let's go! I control what I control, and the rest, I don't give it too much worry, I don't give it too much thought.
Dak, this is Jerry Jones, and you're a Dallas Cowboy.
From a little boy, I've always imagined being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, and I've been blessed to be that, and never imagined wearing anything else.
Too blessed to be stressed, or so Dak says. Whether he remains in Dallas is the big question right now. No long-term deal has been made, but it does seem like the quarterback wants to stay put. On Friday, tight end Blake Jarwin posting a photo on Instagram, tagging Prescott, captioning it with the quote, "Want to run it back in a few months?" To which Prescott then responded by sharing the photo to his story with the message saying, quote, "That's the only way I see it." Stephen A., what does this exchange tell you about Dak and the Cowboys?
Tells me he's not going anywhere. It tells me he doesn't want to go anywhere. And, you know, if you don't want to go anywhere, if you're not going to be dogged in your approach to get what you believe that you deserve, and your only recourse is to wait before ultimately Jerry is compelled to sign you to the kind of deal that you want that involves 4 years instead of 5 years, and that's about as far as you're willing to go, then you know what? Why should somebody else go out and pursue you? Dak Prescott's a hell of a player. He's got a 42-27 record as a starter. Up until his injury last year, he had never missed a game. His previous 4 years, he had never missed a game. It was back page news when he had to miss a practice. Incredibly reliable, trustworthy, model citizen, leader both on and off the field. The players love him. They love playing with him, love playing for him. He's inspirational. He's motivational. And we saw how the Dallas Cowboys crumbled like a cheap tent the second that he was gone. And taking all of those things into consideration, and Jerry Jones still being a bit reluctant to give you the contract you believe you deserve, particularly when he's paid everybody else, and still in all, you do everything you can to show your love, your affection, and your affinity for the Dallas Cowboys. It tells me you're not going anywhere. So Jerry can afford to wait it out because he knows that you're not going to be a problem. You're not going to be Deshaun Watson or various others, even though I'm not knocking Deshaun Watson by any stretch of the imagination because I understand exactly where he's coming from. But when you're a person that gets along as well as Dak Prescott appears to get along with the organization, despite their treatment of him from time to time, and you're still not dogged about moving on, that tells me you're not going anywhere, so we shouldn't expect anything else.
Once upon a time in American team sports, Stephen A., you wanted to play center field for the Yankees or be the center for the Lakers, right?
Or quarterback for the Cowboys.
Or quarterback for the Cowboys. And you know what's happened, since decades have passed? The position changed on the Yankees. Now you want to be the shortstop for the Yankees. Same thing with Lakers. You want to be a backcourt player for the Lakers. But you know what stayed the same? Quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. You know what the other difference is? The Yankees and Lakers have won tons of championships in the intervening years, and the Cowboys haven't. And still, it's quarterback for the Cowboys is the glamour spot. When Dak Prescott says, that's the only way I see it, I don't think that's where I think the accent is. The emphasis is on the I. Not that's the only way I see it. That's the only way I see it. How do they see it is the question. They left him off the hype video. They left him off the hype video. Stephen A., it is perplexing to me that they still haven't come to an agreement with Dak when Jerry Jones seems, hey, average annual value, I'll give it to you. I just want to give you an extra year. And Dak's agent, I suppose, is saying, no. We don't want that extra year because we think we'll do better off if we can come to free agency sooner because the CBA will change or the salary cap will change and we'll be able to make more money. Over that little detail at the end of the contract, 5 years from now, Jerry is towing the line. He's holding the line right there. I think when Dak tweets this out, the emphasis on the I as in, look, we're at an impasse. By the way, in a division, the worst division ever, right? The NFC East. And you say, well, Washington's defense, who's going to be their quarterback? The Giants haven't gotten better, really, not to where they're going to challenge anything. And the Eagles are in disarray. So under those circumstances where this division's ripe for the picking, you're going to start to bog down in the details of a fourth or fifth season if you're the Cowboys? I think that's what Dak is talking about. You leave me off the hype video? You're saying I may not be in your future? Hey, everybody, I just want to make it very clear. I want to be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Do they want it?
Well, the sad part about that is that's what Jerry gets to lean on, and that's what Stephen Jones gets to lean on. And, all joking aside, Max, with me trolling Cowboy fans because I can't stand them. We all know that. But I actually like Jerry Jones a great deal. I really do. I like him a lot. I've had the pleasure of talking to him on several occasions, and I'm really, really very fond of him. It's just that with this particular situation, it's almost one of those things where you walk into the negotiating room and you give away all your leverage because they know how much you love being a part of the organization. If Jerry Jones was the owner of the Houston Houston Texans, he wouldn't be able to get away with this. If he was owning the New York Jets, he wouldn't be able to get away with this. If he was owning a multitude of franchises, any franchise in the National Football League, he wouldn't be able to get away with this. And I guess this almost validates the fact that they are America's team, because the star in the helmet, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, the $1 billion playpen, the history of the Dallas Cowboys in terms of their tradition, the playmaker, prime time, Emmitt Smith, even Roger Staubach. And by the way, major props to the Hall of Fame, to the voters finally getting Drew Pearson into the Hall of Fame. It was a beautiful and touching thing. It was long overdue. He should have been in the Hall of Fame, the original number 88 with the Dallas Cowboys. And to give him that announcement with Roger Staubach and Jerry Jones right there in attendance was a beautiful, beautiful thing. He deserves it, and I'm happy for him. So we know the history of the Dallas Cowboys and what they represent. I just think in this particular instance, Jerry Jones is leaning on it in a very negative way, because you're using it to compel Dak Prescott to stay in Big D on your terms. And I think it's a damn shame that he's doing that. This is not the person he should be doing that to. This is the guy that he should be embracing in every way imaginable, because Dak Prescott has epitomized everything you should want your quarterback to be. It really is. It's a damn shame that Jerry Jones is picking him to play that hard line in it. Just like it's just 1 year, Dak Prescott wants 5 instead of 4. We understand, or I'm sorry, 4 instead of 5. I understand if you're Jerry, you want the 5th year or whatever, but damn, that Jerry's in his late 70s now. This is 4 or 5 years down the road. If the man wants 4 years instead of 5, why are you sweating it, man?
Well, I think maybe you answered it. I think the idea for Jerry Jones may be this is keeping us talking about them, right? If Jerry's gotten his mind, in the end, I'll give him what he wants. But I can string this along and keep the Dallas Cowboys on the front page, so to speak. They're talking about it on First Take. It's all over the media. Well, look, here's an alternative for Jerry, in my opinion, Stephen A. Remember when Jimmy Johnson was on the show? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very clear what's going on with the Cowboys. It's the curse of Jimmy Johnson. Mm-hmm. Not in the Ring of Honor. Are you kidding? Jerry, put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor. Get out of your own way, and the curse of Jimmy Johnson will be lifted. Give Dak Prescott the contract and work on the defense.
But
this ain't that hard.
You got a smirk. You got a smirk on your face, and you're laughing, and I don't blame you for it, because I understand where it's coming from. But it takes a far more serious tone with me from the standpoint that Jimmy Johnson clearly delivered for you. And the only reason you would keep him out is for your personal feelings. The fact that I have a problem with the fact that the owner has that definitive of a say as to who gets into the Ring of Honor. The Ring of Honor should be determined by the fans who watched and supported your team all of these decades, even before you ever arrived, Jerry Jones, that helped uplift or live up to an uplifted name brand. And then in the case of Dak Prescott, let's also remember, Max, that I had a problem with the fact that, again, you're waiting until a guy gets hurt. Remember, when Dak Prescott first came on board, you were reluctant to put him at the helm when Tony Romo was there. Even though Tony Romo had injuries, he clearly wasn't 100%, and Dak Prescott was flat out balling and was clearly the future, just coming in as a rookie. You have held out on this guy at every turn. And it's 5 years later, and Jerry's is still doing the same thing he did to Dak Prescott as a rookie. I don't find that funny.
But, well, this is why it's funny to me. Because Jerry Jones seems to have gotten used to the idea, and that's why I wouldn't put it past him just to string this along to keep the Cowboys in the headlines. Maybe the same thing with Jimmy Johnson, Ring of Honor. Jerry Jones, it's difficult to win a Super Bowl. It's difficult to be in the headlines for winning all the time. Jerry Jones has been unable to do that in a quarter century. And he did it originally because he ushered in the era of the hard cap and then manipulated it with a roster bonus, right, immediately to grab Deion Sanders. But once that little parlor trick was discovered and everyone figured out how to do that, he didn't have that advantage. And they haven't won anything in 25 years. So my point is, it's easier to do what Jerry Jones is doing, to stroke your ego by keeping your team in the news and making your money the same way without winning. What's harder to do, or at least less ego gratifying, but in the long run is better, is if you cut the shenanigans and just get to the business of running a football program, because the Dallas Cowboys would have a shot then.
All right, yeah. Well, before Dak Prescott was looking for 4 years rather than 5, but now things look like they may have changed. Ed Warder said this morning on KJZ that now Dak Prescott wants a 3-year deal, $40 million a year. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, guys. Also, the franchise tag period starts next week. All right, we're going to leave it there because it is time to yell it from the rooftops. It is time to stop the flop. The league warning the king about his theatrics. Don't miss and always watch it live on the ESPN app. Chris Doyle has resigned as the director of sports performance for the Jacksonville Jaguars after backlash due to his hire. Doyle, formerly the strength coach at the University of Iowa, was accused of making racist remarks and also bullying players while he was there. Jags coach Urban Meyer and GM Trent Falk released a statement late Friday night that said the team failed to properly consider the impact of hiring Doyle. Stephen A., what's your reaction to this news?
Well, I think it was a bad call on the part of Urban Meyer. Now, me personally, I don't know if cancer culture applies here or whatever, but I'm of the mindset that this is the land of second chances. And, when I initially heard of the hire of Chris Doyle, I sided with Urban Meyer from this perspective. He said it was vetted. I assumed that he had spoken to players, as well as folks within the organization before making the decision, and that it wasn't a unilateral decision on his part, and that everybody was on board. And that's really the way that I took it, and I left it at that. Little did I know that Urban Meyer hadn't consulted with players, hadn't really talked to anybody. He swore that he vetted Chris Doyle, but clearly, the facts show otherwise. The reality of the situation is that to have this guy coming out of Iowa, known for racist remarks and bullying and belittling players, that's bad enough. But when you take into account Urban Meyer's history, particularly as it pertained to Zach Smith, the former Ohio State receivers coach, he had hired 3 years after Zach Smith got in trouble on domestic violence charges and stuff like that. Urban Meyer has dropped the ball, and that was years ago. And so to come into the new job and to do it again, and this is one of your first hires, it makes Urban Meyer look very, very bad. It makes him come across as very desensitized or insensitive to the times that we're living in and what's been going on. And more importantly, I think he can expect to be confronted by some players who'd want an explanation as to why he would think that it was okay to make that decision. And just as an aside, I just want to say this. I'm one of those guys who believes if you're not in jail, okay, if you're not incarcerated, you should be working for somebody, because if you ain't working for somebody, then that means we got to support you as citizens paying our taxes and stuff like that. I support everybody being employed. So I'm never happy about folks being unemployed, because to me, that's just weight on society as a whole. Having said all of that, when you're in positions of leadership and you're a leader of men and you have a plethora of men that you're overseeing, and to some degree you're going to have to answer to as well, even though you're the boss, you've got to sensitize yourself to a situation well enough to know what decisions you should and should not make. And Urban Meyer, him doing this shows us that the very things that he's apologized for in the past in terms of making bad judgment calls and what have you, he still isn't finished making those highly questionable calls. And that's the unfortunate part of all of this.
Let's talk about cancel culture, Stephen A. I am against it if it's permanent. If the cancellation means you're permanently disqualified from participating in American life, in your chosen profession, even at the highest levels, because you've made a mistake, I'm against that. However, and I agree with you, second chances and then some. What is the point? To punish just to punish?
Yeah.
No, it's to make people better, to make the world better, right?
Yeah.
But before you get the second chance, I think you need to be held accountable. You need to take accountability for your behavior. You need to take steps to correct it, and then you can move on. I haven't seen, let's take Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer comes out at the press conference and says, or makes the statement, that this was thoroughly vetted, right? He vetted it, and the players are going to have to trust me. Hold on a second. He also talked about transparency. Okay, well, coach, to the issue of transparency, what was the vetting process like? What questions did you ask him? Why are you now satisfied? What did he tell you? That can't be opaque. You can't say it's transparent on the one hand and then it's not transparent on the other. Because when the players just have to trust you, what you're saying is, in my judgment, it's not actually transparent. In my judgment, everything's okay now. I haven't heard accountability taken, and I don't know what Urban Meyer's judgment is based on. What were the steps? What were the vetting steps actually taken? So when he tells his players, you'll just have to trust me, that is the opposite of transparency. And because I haven't heard an accountability taken, I don't know that the subject in question is ready to have the second chance. Furthermore, Stephen A., you brought up, I believe you touched on Zach Smith, right? Mm-hmm. Is Urban Meyer's, especially recent history, indicative of a head coach or an administrator who makes sound decisions in this department? It doesn't seem to me it is. Well, it seems to me that contradicts his very point. So just to conclude my point, I am also against cancel culture if it means you are permanently canceled, with few exceptions. However, there must be responsibility taken first. I didn't see that here.
I agree with you. I will say this, too. If we want to get into the mind, the psyche of a Urban Meyer, based specifically on his words in terms of you're going to have to trust me. Urban Meyer, who I believe to be a brilliant football coach, is clearly one of those people. Last time we saw him, he was winning 90% of his games at Ohio State, won a couple national championships, one national championship at Florida. We know what he brings to the table as a coach. He's clearly one of those people, I believe, when he said, you have to trust me. In other words, he's saying, I'm a winner. I win. Trust me that the things that I'm doing will lead to us winning. Right. And obviously there are people that are going to have a problem with that because they're like, winning isn't everything. Well, to a lot of football coaches, as Lombardi would say, yeah, it's the only thing.
And certainly to Urban Meyer.
You know what I'm saying? And so that would explain things. Which brings me to Trent Baalke. Let's not let him off the hook. He is the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. You do have some say within that organization. You're not a novice at this. You used to be in San Francisco in pro personnel, and then you were the GM. You've been around. And so for you to be around and for this to happen under your watch as well, because the players can only say but so much. Yeah, they can say it, but this is not basketball. It's football. And so they probably, even though some would speak up, for the most part, dudes will get scared. They'll end up losing their jobs eventually the second you snap a finger.
I want to touch on that.
So you got to look at executives that are working in concert with Urban Meyer. You certainly had the power to say something. Where the hell were you?
I want to touch on that, Stephen A., because you're touching on something now. There is a huge overlap with labor issues and race issues. There is. And if you take the NFL, for example, there are 0 black owners, 0 African-American ownership in the NFL. The players are over 70% African-American. And so the same thing in college, right? Like the predominantly African-American players with few coaches and ADs. So the administrators and the people in positions of authority are usually white, and the labor is usually black, right? So there is an overlap of labor and race issues here. Now, I appreciate that football respects a chain of command, that you're supposed to do your job and trust the authority. It has its roots also like in West Point, not just in the Ivy Leagues. But so I appreciate that. But when the coach in question now, the strength and conditioning coach, is accused by 50-plus players of treating people differently based on race, that sounds credible to me. It's not 1 or 2, it's 50. And then the message comes from the coach, you're going to have to trust me. Here's the authority, here are the players. Here are the white people, here are the black people. And you, none of whom are represented up here in ownership, are going to have to trust us. And here's a strength and conditioning coach who 50 of you said treated you differently based on race. There is a huge overlap between labor and race here.
Oh, it just says that the executive branch need to be diversified.
That's right. And ownership.
Yeah. I don't hear Charlie.
Charlie, looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Charlie.
So I guess I'll take it from here, Charlie. I got you covered. We got to go to commercial break. Lots of stuff coming up. Still more to come about the Jazz, about the Lakers, about Damian Lillard, and more. Stick around.
The Staples Center is not far from Hollywood, but the NBA announcing LeBron James and Kyle Kuzma both are receiving warnings for their theatrics violating the NBA's anti-flopping rule in the Lakers' win over the Grizzlies on Friday. Now, James and Kuzma, just the 6th and 7th players to be given warnings and be reprimanded by the league this season. And of course, we all know this is not the first time we have heard LeBron James and flopping used in the same sentence. So, Max, I ask you, is it fair to label LeBron as a flopper?
And I ask you, is this a trick question? Of course LeBron's a flopper. Of course he's a flopper. Yes, he is. And he was not the first star who tries to get calls. And it's not on the offense, like it's on the defensive end too, of course. Like Dennis Rodman or Draymond Green, guys who put a lot of effort into the defensive end, are they trying to get calls on the offensive player? Of course they are. Is James Harden trying to get calls on the defensive player? Of course he is. LeBron plays both ends of the floor. He's trying to get calls in both places. And partly it's because, of course, like Shaq in a way, LeBron is often compared, I call him, Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson had a baby. He has attributes of Jordan and Magic rolled into one. And he's compared to Jordan and Kobe as these great wing players. But in another way, to me, he belongs in a category with Wilt Chamberlain and Shaquille O'Neal. Unstoppable physical forces, right? And Shaq used to get hacked. And refs at times would look the other way because it's like, well, how they can't even play the game because what else are you going to do to this guy? And so LeBron has some of that going on too. He's so big, he's so fast, he's so great that contact is often made and sometimes he's not getting those calls. So he would like to get them, so he works the refs. Yes, he's a flopper. And by the way, the league is right. Also, you don't want Stephen A. to get into a situation like soccer because already, as we saw from the video, they're just phantom moves where nothing just happened and you're acting like a villain from the old Adam West Batman show, right? Pow, zam, but nothing's landing. The league does not want a situation like that. I know that competitive people are trying to sell calls, but to ask is LeBron a flopper is absurd. Of course he's a flopper. Of course he is.
Well, he is, so I don't have anything to add to that because I know that he is, as is a lot of guys in the league. What I would say to you is that's not where my focus lies when it gets to this subject. My focus lies to the NBA looking for other folks to do the officials' jobs instead of the officials themselves. I remember a few years before he passed away. I'm talking about former Commissioner David Stern, Max, God rest his soul. I miss that man. He was crazy, but I miss him. And I tell you this, we were having a conversation and he was complaining in his office. He'd bring me into his office, had a Pepsi Max, and we're sitting there in his office. He give me my Pepsi. He kicks up his feet. He's like, I'm just tired of it. I'm disgusted with it. I mean, all of this acting, these histrionics. I mean, why don't they go to Hollywood for crying out loud? Go to Tinseltown. It's ridiculous. It's not the NBA. I'm sick of it. And I said, yeah, but it's the NBA's officials' jobs to catch them. Sure, if you get in here, you might, something like, for example, if you LeBron James and you 260 pounds and you're a locomotive coming at a whole bunch of people, you know what? A slap on the arm or whatever the case may be may not affect you. So what you got to do is you got to sell it, because it might have had something to do with you hitting the shot. Or if you see guys working and they're manipulating it effectively, what are you going to do? Vlade Divac used to frustrate the hell out of Shaq because Shaq called, that's why Shaq once called them the Sacramento Queens, instead of the Sacramento Kings, because he got tired of Vlade Divac flopping all the damn time. But here's the deal. How the else you going to guard Shaq? When Shaq drop step and swing that elbow at 320 pounds, 7-1, what you gonna do? So it's like you had to try something. What I'm saying is that if you're competing and you're trying to win, it's the official's job to catch you while you flopping. It's not your job to help them by not flopping. I mean, so when we sit up there and we talk about LeBron James, yeah, you 260, and yeah, you could do a lot of different things. But in the same breath, you want to highlight how you're getting slapped and smacked and pushed and all of this other stuff. And just because you're bigger and stronger than most doesn't mean that you should be subjected to it excessively, more so than anybody else. So if guys are getting away with flopping, you're returning the favor. Like, hell, I know how to do that too. Right? Catch me if you can. I don't see a problem with it. I really don't.
I'm not First of all, I want to point out, I'm going to argue against it, but I want to point out that's a great point. This is a debate show, but that's an excellent point. What it reminds me of are credit card companies when they think they detect fraud and they'll freeze a credit card, and now you're responsible for proving, no, it's not fraud. In fact, I'm traveling or something like that. In other words, what they've done is farm out their work to you. You're now working for the credit card company because those purchases would be insured if it was fraud, right?
Yeah. That's a good example.
I get that. I get that. And that's kind of bogus. Hey, you know what? Refs, do your jobs. Stephen A., the refs have a lot on their plate. And these are very competitive people who are looking to milk, to juice every call, right? I mean, it reminds me of even offensive players like James Harden, who the rule is there so that there's not contact. James Harden manipulates the rule to draw contact and then gets the foul and goes to the line. And to me, there should be rules in place against that, right? Because that's not the product you want. The foul calls are there so you get a clean game, not so the offensive player can manipulate it and then work it to their advantage, like a hitter in baseball working the count,
They're all
trying to get
Hall of
on
Famers,
base.
Max. That were exceptional floppers.
No, the Hall of Famers who draw a lot of walks in baseball, and I don't love that rule. The rule in baseball is there to get the pitcher to throw strikes so you can see some action. So I get it. I understand what the league is saying because they don't want a product where rules are being manipulated in order to achieve a result.
But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Here's my response to that. First of all, let's not forget. I mean, Gary Trent Jr., who I like, by the way, I like a lot. I love what he's doing on Portland. One of the all-time flops 2 weeks ago. Literally dove like he was Superman. I mean, unbelievable. It's like, excuse me, technology. I mean, we catch it. We see you faking it, whatever. But with all the instant replay, with all the going back to the videotape, with all the delays that they force in the game, guess what? You can always institute a rule if we go to the cameras and you know what, you too excessive with this flopping. We can accord you an additional foul. We can do something, or we can take away a timeout. We can do something that make it hurts the team if it's too flagrant. You can do that. Yeah. There are rules that you can implement to dissuade certain things. You can do that.
What wasn't LeBron's too flagrant? Wasn't that a phantom nonsense? You know. Right. Yeah. It gets to a point where the commissioner's got to say, come on, guys. Come on. Let's play ball here.
The theatrics really are just straight up ridiculous, guys. Here's what I think. I think we got All-Star Weekend coming up in just a few weeks. Let's take it a step further. Let's let the guys show off what they've got. Let's have a flopping contest. I don't know. It might be a place to show off their skills.
Not a bad idea.
Max, call your man Nick Khan and tell him to create something for WWE. A couple of those brothers are big enough to be in the squared circle. Let them show up at the WWE and do some stuff. I mean, please, and tell them to consult Ric Flair. They got to consult the Nature Boy.
No doubt, friend of the show.
You got to consult the Nature Boy.
Always got to consult the Nature Boy. All right, guys, we got to leave it there, unfortunately, but I think we can take this a step further if we wanted. All right, we got to know. We want pointer in the final seconds of the game, holding off the Mavericks, giving the Trailblazers the win. Now, this is nothing new. Damian Lillard is a stud. Last night, he had 34 points and 11 assists. His Blazers are 5th in the West. Stephen A., what did this say about Damian Lillard?
What it says is that we owe him an apology. And the number one person on that list would be me. I am a huge fan of Damian Lillard, Dame Time. I believe in it. I always have. And being that, I'm NBA reporters, there's a lot of great guys out there that do a great job. My brothers, the David Aldridges of the world, the people like that, the Lasaku Smith, God rest his wonderful soul. All the guys, the Sam Mitchells. I mean, you see so many different reporters, different analysts, Isaiah Thomases of the world and others. And, Adrian Wojnarowski, the ultimate insider covering the sport for us the way that he does. Just all of my boys, Vincent and the crew, everybody, that we all cover the NBA, Chris Haynes and others, Marcus Spears, love all of them. We all know how great Damian Lillard is. We just don't talk about it enough. And we don't talk about it so much that we have taken this man for granted. And as a result, we find ourselves in a situation where it's LeBron, it's Joel Embiid, it's even Steph Curry that's in the conversation now, et cetera, et cetera. but we lose our way. And I'm going to put myself at the top of the list, blaming myself. All of those great reporters that I mentioned and those great analysts that I mentioned. I'm putting myself at the top of the list because I have this platform. I have First Take 2 hours every day. And I got Stephen A's World, and I got NBA with Stephen A, and all of this other stuff. And I haven't talked about Damian Lillard enough. Number one in the NBA since 2012 with clutch points. Clutch points. Last 5 seconds of the game. Don't get me started with the last 5 minutes. Don't get me started with Dame time. Don't get me started with him averaging 29 and how he's been doing that for the last 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah, right? And he's got Portland 5th in the West, and there's no C.J. McCollum who's missed game. No Nurse, no Jokic. It doesn't matter. I don't even know who the hell. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This brother, Damian Lillard, tell me, and it's a rhetorical question, but I challenge anybody out there to tell me who strikes more fear in you when crunch time arrives than the ball being in his hands. Than the ball being in his hands. I've called Steph Curry the greatest shooter God ever created. Let me tell you something. Steph Curry ain't been Damian Lillard when it comes crunch time. When it comes down to clutch points. This brother is just on another level. And on behalf of all the great NBA reporters, all the great aficionados, all the great analysts, on behalf of everyone, I will put myself at the top of the list. I apologize. It's my fault. Because this brother, Damian Lillard, has been ignored for far too long. He is the real deal. And he does it time and time and time again, and we don't talk about him enough. Well, it's going to stop today. It's going to stop today. He's on that damn MVP list. He's on that MVP list right now. And I will not make that mistake again. I apologize. I apologize. It's my fault. We're going to talk about this man moving ahead, because what he's doing and what he has been doing is ridiculous. And oh, by the way, he signed a contract, Max Kellerman, for $250 million. And still doing it. And we still ignored them. Highest paid do. It's
also
ridiculous.
rhyme, by the way. Damian Lillard can rhyme. Look, Damian Lillard is revered in the basketball world. There's a cult of people in the NBA who revere Damian Lillard. The people who cover him, the fans. Everyone knows he's probably the most clutch player in the game.
Take it for granted.
But
we don't talk about it enough.
I can't sit here. You may feel like you need to apologize. We don't talk about him as much as some of the other guys.
That's what I'm saying.
But there is good reason for that. One, he has not made a lot of deep playoff runs. Those are the people who get talked about. The more deep playoff runs you make, the more of a national figure you are. Two, he's up in the Pacific Northwest. It's not exactly a media hub compared to LA or New York or a sexy destination like Miami or something like that. And three, Stephen A., he is in the MVP conversation in the sense that the preseason favorite, Luka Doncic, right? He was my favorite a lot. I think he was slightly favored to win the whole thing before MVP, before the season started. And Luka's right now ranked about 10th. He was dueling with Lillard last night. Lillard got the best of it, right? Lillard hit the go-ahead shot. Doncic missed the shot that would have saved his team. And yet, most people have Damian Lillard ahead of Luka right now in the MVP race. You know, the reason he's not talked about even more is if I said to you, is he top 2 MVP? No, it's LeBron or Embiid right now. You know, if you want to bring up someone else, it's KD, maybe Jokic after that. You know, you can get to some, is it Steph or Lillard? In other words, it's kind of like the All-Star game thing. Where, oh, that guy was snubbed. Well, if he's snubbed, you got to tell me who should be off the team to put him on. Damian Lillard is a top 10 player. I think everyone agrees with that. Damian Lillard is in the MVP conversation, but not one of the two guys right now who we believe is going to win it. Damian Lillard is a great player, but we're not taking his team to win the championship. That's why he's not talked about more.
Max, Russell Westbrook won the MVP. What were they, the 6th seed? I know he averaged a triple-double, but they were the 6th seed. And let's face reality, got mad respect for Russell Westbrook. He ain't never been this dude. Russell Westbrook's the most athletic point guard in NBA history. But in terms of running a team, being a leader, and being the shot maker, He ain't never been Damian Lillard. We talk about him more. Steph Curry
I don't know.
is
I don't know about that. I don't know that Westbrook at his best. Lillard's better than Westbrook at his best.
The only time we've talked about Damian Lillard was when he was in a bubble or when he got into the rap battle with Shaq. That's it. That's it. And we got 2 hours.
And guys, this was Lillard's 33rd
I guess we'll be getting him into the show more now.
The final minute of a game. Let's look for more rap battles in the future, more go-ahead shots.
No, his game is good enough.
Clutch. We're going to leave it.
Don't talk about Dame more.
All right, game is good.
We've told you the quarterback carousel is going to spin.
Touchdown, Houston.
That's just in my DNA.
Prescott strolls into the end zone.
Rolling, extends the play. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown, 49ers.
I'm just as hungry as ever.
Perfectly thrown by Carson Wentz.
He takes the snap. He's going to run it, and he waltzes into the end zone.
Russ. And absolutely perfect to DK Metcalf.
You tell me where he's going, and that carousel will keep spinning on and on, around and around.
And now it is time for the latest in our quarterback continued series. That's My Quarterback. And here to join us and, of course, help keep the guys in line, we've got my podcast partner, Kimberly Martin. Also, Chiney Ogumake joining us on First Take, Her Take.
Kimberly.
Every Wednesday, new episodes dropping. So, Max, Stephen A., I hope that you're tuning in along with everybody else. But guys, look, we have a couple different teams we got to get to. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to recognize some of the teams in the league that have some uncertainty under center and then predict who is going to be their week 1 starter this coming season. So let's start with the AFC and the Patriots. Okay, so last offseason, the Patriots signed Cam Newton to a 1-year prove-it deal. Cam went 7-8 as the starter, throwing only 8 touchdowns with 10 picks. The question, will it be one and done for Cam in New England? So Stephen A. Smith, fill in the blank. The Pats' week 1 starter next season will be...
Well, first of all, before I answer that question, let me just say I'm not only tuning in. I'm waiting for my invite from the ladies. I mean, damn, the ladies haven't called me to come on the show. It would have been nice to get an invite from y'all, but we'll talk about that another day. Okay, we'll talk about that another day.
There's always an invite for you, Stephen A.
I feel you, Charlie. We'll see, Charlie. We'll see. Here's the deal. I'm going to tell you that I don't think it's one and done, because I'm trying to figure out what assets the New England Patriots have available to get the quarterback that they need. And I'm combining that with the lack of suitors that's going to be out there for Cam Newton. Threw 8 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, if I remember correctly, and wasn't really that impressive as far as I'm concerned. This was not a good season for him. We know COVID played a significant role. We know 8 to 9 different individuals started off the season by not even showing up for the New England Patriots because of COVID. So I'm certainly not casting any aspersions on Bill Belichick, the coach. The GM might be another matter, but not the coach. But I'm just looking at it from the standpoint, when I look at the New England Patriots right now, I saw Bill Belichick displaying a level of understanding, of patience, and empathy towards a player that I had never witnessed through the eyes. I never saw that from Bill Belichick before. And so when I saw that with Cam Newton, as Cam Newton sat on the bench, as Bill Belichick elected to bench him and things of that nature, I just saw a level of understanding and patience. I saw him being more complimentary than I'm accustomed to hearing Bill Belichick spew about players. And I think that he actually wants to give Cam Newton a second go round at all of this. I could be wrong because I'm not reporting on the team. I'm not in Boston. They are. But that's just the sense that I get. And it would not shock me if I ended up seeing Cam Newton back in New England next season. I don't think it's the right move because I think Cam Newton needs weapons, and he don't have them in N'Keal Harry and others. But I do think that Bill Belichick is inclined to keep him on board for some reason.
I think there's reason to believe that, Stephen A., because the Patriots won 7 games without a lot of weapons, with a lot of defections off the defense as a result of COVID before the season ever started, and probably less on offense than even Brady had the year before. And then Cam, off a catastrophic injury, new system, in that situation I just mentioned, himself had COVID. And I think it affected his performances. He even talked about the COVID kind of fog after that. Missed games, the practice facilities were shut down. When you need to practice with new teammates, you couldn't do it. Won 7 games, but also beat a whole bunch of really good teams last year. And quarterback stats, it's just like a way of measuring a means to an end. even if your stats don't look great, if you're getting the wins and the coach feels you're competitive and all that, okay, I get why you would say that. But I believe Jimmy G is going to be available. I think Bill Belichick values Jimmy Garoppolo. I think this Brady-Belichick thing is not over, although Brady is in a big lead right now. And I think that Garoppolo, when you consider the money, it's not what the premier quarterbacks make. It was really more of an upper middle class contract than elite kind of contract. And Garoppolo does the thing that Belichick really likes from his quarterback. He gets the ball out quickly, makes quick reads, gets the ball out quickly. I think there's a very good chance, if I had to guess, that Jimmy G is the Patriots starter this year.
Okay, so between these two options, if I had to choose between Cam or Jimmy G, I'm going to go with Cam because he's cheap and he had a bad year last year. And he's going to come into 2021 looking to prove, like, I can actually play in this league. However, I think both of these choices are a little short-sighted. Why would Jimmy G be available? Why would the 49ers say, okay, we'll part with him if Deshaun Watson is available? You could see Deshaun going to the 49ers, right? So Jimmy G is expendable when compared to Deshaun Watson. I think the Patriots, at this point, they need to go all in. Like, they need to either find the guy in the draft, a young kid, and then pair him. Like, let's say you could get Cam on the cheap and you have a QB competition. Cam could be the week one guy while he's the bridge to the next guy. But Jimmy G, Belichick loves Jimmy G. I'm sure he does. We heard Belichick loves Jarrett Stidham. Oh, Tom Brady's not here anymore. It's going to be Jarrett Stidham's team. We're going to see Jarrett Stidham. We didn't see Jarrett Stidham. And now we're talking about who's going to be the QB of the future, and no one's talking about Jarrett Stidham. So I understand the connection to Jimmy G, but at this point, the window for Belichick, it is closing very quickly on this team. You need to go all in and find the guy that's going to change the franchise.
Well, he wanted that to be Jimmy G. That's the point. Stidham was just what was left over. He was going to hand the franchise to Jimmy G. Tom Brady had to do an end around and go to the owner to get that changed. So here it's a little bit different because he wanted to give it to Jimmy G. By the way, a guy who has his QB to interception ratio is like 2-1. His 1-to-loss ratio is 3-1.
Well, Max.
And Stephen A., when he doesn't play, his teams never win. I think Belichick looks at that too.
You're making a case against yourself with that argument because the more you hype Jimmy G, the harder it would be for New England to get him. What are the assets that you're willing to give up? What are the assets that you have to give up if you're going to get Jimmy G in return? That's why I don't subscribe to that. Bill Belichick may have given them away for a second-round pick. I assure you, San Francisco ain't going to do that. San Francisco definitely is going to get, hell, you ain't giving them up for a second-round pick. No, they ain't going to do that. Not to New England. That's number one. Number two, of course, Deshaun Watson is a significant upgrade. The problem with Houston is that, again, if you lose somebody the caliber of a Deshaun Watson and you see recent moves that have been made in the National Football League and what has been surrendered in the case of a Matthew Stafford and others and what assets were given up. Well, if you got those assets for players like that, what the hell are you going to get for Deshaun Watson? So Houston's asking themselves that question in terms of who's going to be willing to mortgage the farm in order to get Deshaun Watson. I'm thinking that New England doesn't have much to offer. And as a result of not having much to offer, you might be stuck in a situation where Cam Newton for the immediate moment is the best route for you to take. And that's all I'm saying in regards to that. We're not looking at it, all right, where's the better place to land up or whatever. I'm talking about Cam Newton being somewhat stuck because there's so many questions about him, and New England being stuck because they don't have so many assets to give up.
The Patriots can make Jimmy G work contractually. They can make it all fit. They can make it all fit. However, do you want to make it fit? You got, I understand Jimmy G was the guy that they didn't want to give away a couple years ago. But if the team that supposedly loves him is fine saying, you know what, if we could get another player, we'll give up Jimmy G. Why is that the guy the Patriots should want? The Patriots need an answer that they can win with for the long term. I think all these guys are sort of these stopgap. And the reason I say Cam is because he's the cheapest option. You don't have to give up a lot to keep Cam. And that, to me, it's the financial aspect of the
What I would say is this. There's supposed to be a lot of quarterback movement this offseason. And let's assume, Adam Schefter a week or two ago said 18 is the over-under, and he took the over. But even if that's not exactly the case, if things have changed, if half the teams, or anything approaching half the teams, have new quarterbacks, Shanahan had a lot of success with Matt Ryan. Who knows? Like, is Atlanta really in a position where they're about to make a run, or maybe it's time to move on? If they get Matt Ryan, Jimmy G becomes expendable. And even if he's not the dynamic quarterback we're seeing around the league, guys, again, he almost never loses when he starts for teams that almost never win when he doesn't. I think Belichick could be interested.
Okay, well, a lot of expected movement, which is exactly why we're having these discussions right now. But we do have to move on to our next team, and I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed for this one. I am an Indy girl, guys. So, look, Phillip Rivers, he's out with the Colts. They must find someone to fill the major hole that the team has. Jacoby Brissett was the backup last season, a former starter in Indy as well. So, Max, tell me something good. The Colts' Week 1 starter will be...
Now, I just think there's a good chance it's Sam Darnold. It seems to me, when I hear the Jets are fielding a lot of calls about Darnold, look, if I'm the Jets, I'm probably going to move on. He's very young still. There's a chance he's a good quarterback going forward. But when you spend a draft pick as high as that, and it's been several years, and he's statistically the worst quarterback in football. I know weapons and a dysfunctional franchise and all that. Like, look what Baker Mayfield did when things got better. Maybe that could happen to Darnold. But if I'm the Jets, I want more of a sure thing. Or at least, obviously you're going to be looking at Deshaun Watson if you could possibly swing that. Even if I think Miami is actually better positioned to bring him in if they so choose. There are guys like, people talking about Justin Fields in this draft not being the second or maybe even third quarterback taken. The Jets have all this draft capital. They could actually get even more flipping Sam Darnold, get even more trading down, still wind up with a quarterback who they may feel is going to be better in the long run than Sam Darnold and reset the rookie contract, right? So they get more years of control before they have to pay him. I just think Darnold is likely to be available. I think the Colts could be a fit.
Well, my hesitation about Sam Darnold is strictly because of contamination factor. He was working under Adam Gase. And we all know how atrocious he was as a coach. He never should have been a head coach for the New York Jets to begin with. He showed up to the press conference, as far as I'm concerned, my personal opinion, he showed up as an introductory press conference. Ha! Okay, looking zooted out his damn mind, all right? And as far as I'm concerned, coached like it for the vast majority of his time in Gotham City, even though they were playing football games at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So I definitely think that you don't touch Sam Darnold for the immediate moment because we got to make sure that he's not contaminated and he won't infect anybody, okay? Because that's how bad it was playing for Adam Gase. Having said all of that, I happen to believe that Jacoby Brissett can play. I don't think he's a scrub. Now, last time we saw him was in 2019, even though he threw 8 passes or whatever last season. We know it was Phillip Rivers' team. He gave him $25 million for 1 year. But the bottom line is this. Jacoby Brissett the year before, although it was a 7-8 record in the 15 games he played, threw for nearly 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. Obviously can run with the football as well. He's got some motor. He's not a stationary target. And I don't think that Sam Darnold can be viewed as a significant upgrade to Jacoby Brissett at this particular moment in time. So because of that, it would not shock me at all if Indy ended up keeping Jacoby Brissett, giving him an opportunity now that he's been there in Indy with Frank Reich. Frank Reich knows the system, etc. He might have some confidence in him. I say give the brother a chance. Let Sam Darnold go somewhere else, but not there.
I'm going to introduce another guy. I'm going to say Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz at Indy's price tag, not what the Eagles are trying to get, because the Eagles want everybody to believe that this is Carson Wentz from 2017. We know better. We have seen differently. But I felt like Carson Wentz was his best with Frank Reich. He flourished with Frank as his OC in Philly. Now, the numbers need to match up. The fact that the Bears, another team that has connections to Carson Wentz and some of his former coaches are there, and the Colts, these two teams have not made a deal yet, signals to me that the price has got to come down. I think Carson Wentz I would rather have Carson Wentz than Sam Darnold. Stephen A. mentioned the contamination factor with Sam Darnold. The Colts are a team that had Phillip Rivers. Like, this was a team that was a QB away from being in the AFC title game. You felt like, if they just get a really good quarterback, this team is money. They're going to go. They get Phillip Rivers. And it's still not quite right. It still doesn't work. So if I'm Indy, I'm going to say, you know what would work? Sam Darnold? No. So, and Jacoby Brissett has been there. I think the kid can play. Stephen A., you think the kid can play?
Well, let me say this real quick.
Let me just
finish.
Go ahead. You think Stephen A., you think Jacoby can play? I don't doubt that. The question is, what does the team think? Because the team brought in Phillip Rivers. You know what I mean?
Well, they brought in Phillip Rivers. They didn't bring in Carson Wentz. Not the Carson Wentz with the season he just had. That's number one. Number two, I don't necessarily disagree with you about Carson Wentz because I get your point. Because I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago because he used to play with under Frank Reich. He went down in his MVP caliber season and Nick Foles took over and they won the Super Bowl. I get all of that. But here's the flip side to it. Doesn't Jalen Hurts remind you a little bit of Jacoby Brissett? He does to me. I mean, he can throw, but he ain't the most accurate thrower in the world. He's certainly a good athlete. He's got some wheels on him, etc. And he took Carson Wentz's starting job really by default because Carson Wentz was just god-awful. I'm just saying when you look at it from that perspective, it's entirely plausible that, you know what, you might elect to go with Jacoby Brissett because he's going to keep the mistakes to a minimum. He may not be a game breaker or a game changer, but a better option than Carson Wentz? Maybe.
I think Kimberly's logic is sound. I think, Kimberly, your logic is very sound here. They're not. I mean, I thought it was ridiculous that they're asking for a first-round pick. To me, you should have to include draft capital to get out of that Carson Wentz deal. He was the worst quarterback in football this year, including Sam Darnold. And I'd rather have Sam Darnold in the locker room, right? So
I agree with that.
And this is the only reason I didn't say the Colts for Wentz, because I think your logic is very sound, including why it wouldn't be Brissett. The reason I would say that is because DiFilippo is in Chicago. And so that's, as you mentioned, part of the kind of coaching tree that was there when Carson Wentz was having success in Philadelphia. And when I look at Chicago, especially with that offensive line, I'm thinking they're going to want a quarterback who can move around a little, who has some big play possibility in him. They're not going to want the price tag to be very high. So I see him as maybe more likely to wind up in Chicago than in Indianapolis.
It's Sam Darnold, though?
All right. Some definite possibilities here, guys. We'll see what happens in Max. You just mentioned Sam Darnold possibly going to the Colts, which means now the Jets have a quarterback situation of their own. So that's our last team we're going to be investigating today on That's My Quarterback. Sam Darnold's future with Gang Green is really anything but certain. New York has been mentioned in the Deshaun Watson race and may have the best assets to acquire him. So, Stephen A., the Jets' Week 1 starter will be...
Right now, the way I'm looking at it is Sam Darnold. But let me say this for the record. If I'm the New York Jets and I have any opportunity whatsoever to get my hands on Deshaun Watson, I would give up 3 first-round picks. I would give up Sam Darnold. I would throw in a masseuse, a massage therapist, car service into perpetuity.
Firstborn.
I'd slide his mama a new house. You know what I'm saying? Or I'd make sure to give her access to the private jet so she can fly in on Sundays for games. Whatever the hell he wants, and I'd give it to him. Figure it out. If you're the New York Jets, you go all the way in because Deshaun Watson is a game changer. He's a showstopper. On top of it all, he's a model citizen who would be great for the New York market. And folks in Gotham City would rally around that brother in a heartbeat, and you wouldn't have to worry about the quarterback position for years to come. Got to buffer your offensive line. Make sure you protect this brother. Can't put him on suicide watch. But outside of that, you could build around this dude. You do whatever it takes. I just don't see them being able to do it. And as a result, I think they're going to be stuck with Sam Darnold. And that's where I'm at with it.
You know, I hear what you're saying, Stephen A. I actually think Miami is best positioned to get Deshaun Watson. Like, if they really want him, if I was Houston, I would think
management.
because if Tua was in this draft, I would want him over everyone but Trevor Lawrence. So they have Tua there. If the Texans value Tua, they can give them Tua, start with Tua and the number 3 pick in the draft. And if I'm Deshaun Watson, I want Miami because usually if the team is drafting that high up, they stink. But Miami got the number 3 pick through a trade. So they're actually quite good and poised to be even better. I just think that the Dolphins, if they want Deshaun, are best situated to get him. So where does that leave the Jets? I understand why people would still have hope for Sam Darnold. I would move on were I the Jets. It wouldn't be an easy choice, but I would do it. And I think there's a guy in this draft whose stock has fallen because of a couple of games during a weird kind of college football season. But at one point, it really wasn't clear that it's Trevor Lawrence 1 and then everyone else 10, 11, and 12.
Fields.
It was 1 and 1A. That was Justin Fields. And if I'm the Jets and I'm looking at this team, I'm not thinking we're about ready to win. I'm thinking we need a total rebuild. If I can move Sam Darnold and get some draft capital back, even if I don't get Deshaun Watson, if I can trade down from the number 2 spot and get stuff back, including all the other draft capital I have, I can walk away with Justin Fields and 1 million draft picks on top of the 1 million draft picks I have. That's a rebuild. I think Fields has a chance to be the second most special quarterback in this draft. And there was a time not long ago where we were wondering out loud, could he be the most special? That's who I'd target if I were the Jets.
All I'm going to say is